Unfortunately, the deputy has left that made the allegation of sanctimonious wrath against a colleague over here in another party. And I can't think of anything more inappropriate from a TD, part of the government that is standing over a housing crisis. The only sanctimonious wrath that I've ever heard in this chamber has been from successive governments as a tool and a weapon to obfuscate, to avoid, to confuse, so that a way of not analysing the problem. Sanctimonious wrath. It's an interesting thing when we look at almost 16,000 people homeless. And I use these figures, and I'm in the Dáil since 2016, and Minister, you know very well, and you're familiar with Galway from me harassing you. Well, I'll take that word back, from constantly following you in relation to a task force in Galway that shouldn't really be there because it's not functioning from my understanding of a task force. So the homeless numbers have increased and increased, and we're here today, and I'm going to come back in relation to legislation that we've no choice but to support, to extend our PSAIDs to the whole of the country. A piece of legislation that has been introduced in a chaotic, disorderly fashion, with no pre-legislative scrutiny, which the committee had to agree with given the urgency of it, and so that no scheme is ever analysed or studied in the context of what has happened. And we keep adding the pieces of the jigsaw with no picture, except the picture of the market will provide. And you know, I thought today, what can I say really, over and over and over. And the phrase sanctimonious rot actually inspired me to stand up and say, good Lord, this is what we're dealing with. As almost 15,000, 16,000 people are homeless. We have normalised homelessness. We have normalised lack of security of tenure. We have turned language on its head, just like we have in terms of international relations with Gaza, with Israel. We've turned language on its head, and we're creating a very serious problem in Ireland where more and more there's a lack of faith in anything that a government says. And actually, I don't wish that on any government because it's very, very dangerous. Words have to mean something. Policies have to mean something. And we deal with that we talk about disinformation. Most of the disinformation that I'm concerned about arises from the government. Whether it's nationally or international politics, it arises from the government. Specifically in relation to housing, I left the local authority in 2016. We were in the middle of a housing crisis in Galway in 2016. I became a TD and the privileged role that gave me. In 2018 and 19, we talked about a task force because of the emergency in Galway. That task force has set year after year with absolutely no report given an analysis of what the problem is, what has led to the housing crisis in Galway City and County. Now, you'd imagine that a task force, that it's on its second chair, both chairs, I don't wish to personalise it at all, with serious experience, with all the department represented and the councils represented. And you know, by December of last year, they finally asked the question, and I said this the other night, and I hate repeating, but I'm going to repeat. They're finally asking the question under the new chair, set up in 19 and finally in December 24, which is the last time I've minutes for. So I'm out of date with my minutes. Such is the up-to-dateness of the task force. And they tell us that they're going the wrong direction. The delivery figures are absolutely going the wrong direction. And they tell us that we need to look at how we're going to get overhaul housing delivery massively ramped up. And they begin to ask, what are the obstacles? And they lay out the obstacles 5-7 years after it was set up. And you know, one of the major obstacles is we didn't build any houses. We stopped building in 2009. We didn't build any infrastructure. And we have one of the members of the, I don't know if he's the chair of the new infrastructure task force, talk about objectors as a problem. And a Claire Byrne interview. Let me say I was singularly unimpressed, and I'm repeating it for the second time. Infrastructure wasn't built, so we have no second treatment plant on the east side of the city in Galway. We have none in Carrow. We can't have balanced development. And we had a debacle over Uisce Éireann, where we were forced into condemning Uisce Éireann, a divide and conquer, rather than resourcing the local authorities who had all the knowledge, rather than resource the local authorities in relation to housing, we've not done that either. And so we now have a scheme. Tomorrow the public accounts will talk to the Department of Housing. I and my colleagues have attempted to look at the documentation that we've got. My God, I don't know how many schemes are now there in relation to housing. And we have a housing crisis. And we have children living homeless in accommodation. And we have the delegation gone in from Simon today to meet the Minister in relation to the mental health and the health problems arising from homelessness. You might just tell me, sorry, when I'm stopped. Yeah. So the consequences of the decisions of successive governments to treat housing as a product to be bought and sold, to back up the market, to change housing policy with a stroke of the pen back in 2014 after running a pilot project on HAP, Housing Assistance Payment, which said you're adequately housed once you get a HAP payment. They called me a liar. I said it was very close to being a lawyer, but not quite at the time. But they said I was a liar when I said you were taken off the list. I was subsequently proved correct. So if you went on a HAP, you were taken off the list. Problem after problem created. I'm now in a city where my staff are really finding it very difficult, like other TDs, to deal with the level of housing problems that are coming in. 16 years on a waiting list in Galway, made homeless. 15 years made homeless. Living in cars, coming into us begging. You know what we're told? The homeless services are absolutely chock-a-block. The Simon community produce a report every quarter and they tell us there are no properties available under the HAP schemes, even the discretionary schemes, and a task force that's going nowhere and around in circles. So I finish by saying I'm absolutely at a point of despair in relation to the problems you've created, government policy. One essential part of the solution is public housing on public land, just full stop. We didn't do it in Galway since 2009. Now we have a land development agency who's going to get more power to use public land to build premium housing down in the docks and so on. So I don't wish to go on for the sake of going on, and I really didn't wish to speak here at all today because I've spoken so often, sometimes for a minute, sometimes for 15 minutes, on a housing crisis that is a deliberate consequence of government policy relying on a market, and we've made it into a product. I have 2 sons in Dublin and they're renting. I know exactly, and I know from my office in Galway, the position is chaotic. And when a government comes to the point where they've normalised homelessness, we are in serious trouble as a republic.